Hello and welcome back to Great American Movie Review. Another one of these kind of mini reviews for new release movies. Once again, Mikiah here flying solo just to talk about the new Saw movie, Saw X. Saw X comes at a really interesting time for the Saw franchise because you had from 2004, where the first one came out and kind of blew up this kind of new trend of what a lot of people call torture porn movies. But I think the Saw movies have a bit more going for them because they really try to, you know, throw in different messages and angles, and you've got this kind of righteous killer kind of thing, at least as he's presented to him, like from his own perspective in the John Kramer Jigsaw character. And it's just kind of been really interesting watching it kind of evolve. It kind of really became a horror soap opera, very half of it like a procedural cop thing as they try to find the killer, and then the people in the traps, constant flashbacks, just all the kind of tropes of the soapy kind of nature of this kind of storytelling with all of the gross out traps and gore and everything. I watched all of the Saw movies for the first time a few years ago, leading up to Spiral. I got hooked into them pretty quickly. It was kind of one of those things. I did this with Expendables actually, because Expendables 4 was coming out, and I said, all right, I'll give the franchise a shot. I've never watched any of these. I'll watch at least the first one and see what kind of happens. And I didn't really like the first Expendables, so I was like, I'm not going to watch, three more of these if I didn't like the first one right now. So that's why I didn't review Expendables 4 at all. But with Saw, it kind of was the opposite. Like, the first Saw was great. And then I just got kind of hooked into the lore and everything that was going on with it. And so I watched all of those movies leading up to when Spiral came out. And that was back in 2021. So yeah, it's been kind of an interesting place though, because from 2004 to 2010, there was a yearly Saw release. Every single year, the first seven Saw movies just dropping like every October, just a new Saw movie would come out for years until there was a big break at the end of what was called Saw, this final chapter, which doesn't hold up to be true anymore. That's a common thing in a lot of horror franchises. But yeah, when Jigsaw came out in 2017, it was kind of in that kind of legacy sequel feeling of a trend, more so than an actual direct follow up. It kind of was taking the legacy of the franchise up to that point and moving on with it in a new direction. And it didn't quite work. It still tried to keep the identity of it. It still had some cool traps, but just wasn't Saw in the same way. And then in 2021, when they did do Spiral, that has a weird story where Chris Rock wanted to get that movie made. They got Samuel L. Jackson to be in it. They're kind of a welcome change. That movie, I think, is a welcome change from what we had with Saw before. If they were going in a new direction, I would have been kind of fine following along with that, but I don't think that movie was entirely successful either. The Saw movies are really well known for their traps, but also their big twists at the end every time. And both Jigsaw and Spiral, the twists just didn't really excite me. And while I would have been interested to see what would happen after Spiral, I'm kind of glad actually that with Saw X, they kind of strip it back down to what has worked about the series and why this series is popular. And don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in this little review. I'm just laying out the general details because I knew nothing going in. I don't watch movie trailers or anything, so I didn't know what this movie was going to be about. So I thought it was cool though. I just knew that they were bringing Tobin Bell back as John Kramer, which is always an interesting thing because technically, if you know the Saw franchise, I mean, he dies in the third one, and then every other appearance that he has is through flashbacks, and then he has like proteges that he kind of has developed over time, and half the reveals in the movies are, oh, this person was actually a Saw acolyte, and so it's just kind of an interesting thing to go back and focus on a story where this might actually be the movie where John Kramer gets the most screen time out of any of the movies. It's also a very linear movie. It takes place between the first and second Saws, which is really the only place that it could fit in. And I think there's a minor, like, mental leap that you have to make that happen, partly because the Saw franchise isn't one that leaves a lot of, like, it likes to fill in the gaps. It's constantly filling in the gaps. So to find find this stretch of time to make this story fit, it's a little bit of a leap. Also, it's 20 years almost since the original Saw came out. And Tobin Bell wasn't young when those came out, but he's definitely older now. And Amanda, one of his main acolytes, especially in those first few Saws, but she continues to make appearances throughout the series as well. She's also a lot older than she was back then, obviously. It's just, I mean, the case. And they don't try to mask it or anything. And for this franchise, I mean, it works. They've already done this so many times where it's like, it would flash back and you'd see Tobin Bell in like a backwards hat or something, and it'd be like, oh, he's younger, or a soul patch. That would be how they would like make him younger. So it's not like, for this franchise, it's not that bad that he like is clearly older and they didn't really try to hide anything. But yeah, this is a lot more focused of a story. Like, it has a very linear structure to it, which is unusual for Saw movies. Sometimes the twist in Saw movies is that this movie is like the timeline that it took place in within the context of everything. But this one, it just is a very simple. John Kramer is dealing with his cancer stuff, and he is seeking help from a specific group that has some experimental treatment that they can use for, that's outside of what is allowed in the US and other countries, so they have to be a little bit secretive about it. It was kind of fun seeing them use like 2000s desktop browsers and stuff like that just to like maintain the continuity there. But yeah, this, for a little while is just kind of almost a drama about John Kramer just seeking out this help, and hoping to get his, cancer cured, which, I mean, if you know the series, obviously that doesn't happen. That's one of the problems with setting it in the past like this. It's trapped back in time. So there's not a lot of room for it to actually expand the lore, but that actually might be a refreshing detail within this, because the lore has been expanded so much that it's kind of nice to just have something that just kind of fits kind of neatly within it and doesn't really try to change too much about it, but just kind of does some character stuff with John Kramer and with Amanda too. They have it, has their dynamic playing out as we've seen before. But once again, I think this movie might actually have the most screen time for both of them. So yeah, after the dramatic part of the story, kind of, it's a little slow early on, but like I said, I was still invested in what was going on. And so once it kind of pivots to the trap section of it, it's satisfying. I don't think the traps are as interesting as a lot of the other movies, but it also makes sense within the context of what this movie's doing, that he wouldn't have as much time to like create the like most elaborate traps that he's created over the years. So I'm okay with it, and it's still just as gross as ever. Like, there are definitely some like, I was looking away and covering my mouth, and like, they were simple, but they were effective, I will say. And like I said, it makes sense for the time and place that this all occurs within, that it wouldn't be as elaborate as some of the other things. Yeah, but it really just works as kind of this revenge story almost, more so than the other Saws. I mean, he's always going after people who have done him wrong to some extent, or just people that he feels like need to be taught this lesson of like, put their life on the line, and allow them to save themselves and find some new appreciation for everything. So this one really works, being a little bit more personally tied to John, his own like experience, and giving us that setup, and then following through with the whole trap half of the movie where he actually has the people captured and he's putting them through the ringer. The person who directed this one is Kevin Grudert. He's been a mainstay of the Saw franchise since the very beginning. He was an editor on the first several Saw movies, and I think he edited the ones that he directed as well, which he directed 6, which is definitely one of the better Saw movies. 7, which is definitely not one of the better Saw movies, but that got caught up in kind of the 3D gimmick and everything. It wasn't great, and especially given that it was supposed to be the last one. But then, yeah, coming back and doing this one, this is definitely one of the better Saw movies to come out, and I think Saw fans specifically, because like I said, they're a very passionate bunch, I think are gonna have a really good time with this movie. I mean, I know I did. I'm a newer Saw fan, but I am a fan, and I think this is one of the best in the franchise, which is shocking because it's the 10th movie in the franchise. So I think it was smart too to do away with the procedural side of all of this, get rid of the whole cop story of them kind of figuring it out. It really is all about John. John is your main character here. It's not just, there's not as much mystery to it because it's all pretty well laid out, but it is very effective, and it does have all of the good things that you want from a Saw movie. It has the traps, it has the twists, and you know what? The twists really worked for me. Like, they got my fist pumping. Like, I was really excited with in a couple of spots towards the end when they were like putting out those reveals. It worked for me, which is something that a Saw movie hasn't, like the last couple really didn't do for me. So I was really happy to kind of get those kind of moments, like that dopamine spike of those twists, and just kind of the satisfaction of when you're watching a Saw movie and it's like this, you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't make sense. Why would this be the case? And then it just kind of uses that against you, like, oh, you were thinking that we missed something. We didn't, and they really get you. It's just that's part of the joy of these movies, is just the satisfaction in like putting the pieces together, and that it really is committed to making everything make as much sense as they're able to. So yeah, if you're a Saw fan, definitely seek this one out. If you're a horror movie fan, I mean, of course, this is a ongoing franchise. You know at this point whether or not it's for you. And I still think it's worth checking out, though. If you've been kind of hit or miss on the franchise, this is definitely one of the better ones. I was very pleased by it. I was really actually surprised. I didn't expect a lot out of a 10th Saw movie, especially after the last couple just weren't up to, the better end of the series. But yeah, I had a really good time with it. I like Saw X quite a bit. It might be, my maybe my third favorite in the franchise. I don't know. I'd have to kind of do a reevaluation there, but yeah, it's up there for sure. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, are you gonna see Saw X this weekend? Are you gonna go check out one of the other releases? To me, this is the first big weekend for releases in a while, just because there hasn't been a lot that I've been interested in lately. But we have Saw X, we got The Creator, Dumb Money Has Gone Wide, Flora and Son has hit Apple. I'm gonna try to watch as many of those as I can and get these little reviews up. So it's gonna be a busy weekend for me. But that'll do it for this little mini review for Saw X. We have new episodes up of the main show every Thursday where we pick a movie and we talk about it. This week it was Crash. Next week it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So if you're interested in those, be sure to check us out every Thursday. But otherwise, I'll see you at the movies. Thanks for joining me.